My name is Maduri.
And my name is Laura.
And today we'll be talking about the principles of APA 7th edition, particularly focusing on effective scholarly writing.
Right. So the APA 7th edition came out in fall 2019. It's been about a decade between the 6th and the 7th edition. The updates have been really great. The guide is more user-friendly than ever. They've made a distinction between professionals who are using APA and students who are using APA. And so the effective scholarly writing principles we're going to be talking about include continuity, flow, conciseness, and clarity.
And these principles can be found in Chapter 4, Sections 4.1 to 4.11 in the official APA handbook.
And we're going to start with the first principle now.
The first principle is continuity, and when you think about this, you want to make sure you do not have any inconsistencies, contradictions, omissions, and irrelevancies. All these aspects really make your paper seem less credible and disorganized. All that's to say that consistency in the expression of your thoughts is very important in having an effective scholarly writing. The second principle is flow. Now, the word choice and the flow of your sentence really impacts the way the readers understand your paper. So two things to keep in mind when you're thinking about flow is the inclusion of transitions. And this helps with the readers understanding your paper and includes transitional words, proper punctuation, and adverbs. The second thing is you must avoid noun strings. Now you may be wondering what noun strings are. So usually it's a combination of nouns one after the other, usually to modify the very last noun. So for example, municipal, solid waste, classification, methodology. In order to correct this, you would write methodology of classifying municipal solid waste. So you can see how writing it in a sentence would make it much more easier for the reader to read and understand versus the noun string.
The next two principles are conciseness and clarity, and they are very much intertwined. So the more concise your writing is, the clearer it's going to be. Now, when Maduri was talking about continuity and flow, she was talking a lot about sentence structure, also known as syntax. And when we're thinking about conciseness and clarity, that has a lot to do with word choice, okay? Word choice matters. Some things that we need to keep in mind when checking our paper for conciseness and clarity include avoiding jargon. So those are very specific terms that only some people understand and not others, right? We also want to avoid contractions like I'm instead of I am or can't instead of cannot. We need to think carefully about our tone. Okay, so the words that we're using, do they have different connotations, different meanings? Can they be taken out of context? Avoiding colloquialisms. Those are casual and formal ways of saying things. For instance, to write out instead of to report. And then one of the biggest things is avoiding repetition and redundancy. So for instance, instead of saying, at the present time, a much more concise as well as a clear way of saying that would just be now, okay? Instead of saying the reason is because, it would be much more concise and much clearer to just say because. Instead of saying both alike, just say alike. Okay, so conciseness and clarity all about being frugal with your words, being very deliberate in your linguistic choices, and of course this is going to make your work more scholarly, it's going to make your work more effective, and it's going to make it easier for your reader to follow your ideas.
All right, so now that we've talked about the 4 principles, we'll just give you a quick recap. So the first principle is continuity, and you want to make sure that your writing is consistent and is credible for your readers. The next thing is you want to make sure your writing flows well, and that includes the word choice, the transitions. This will help your readers understand your writing more easily.
Then you also want to check your writing for conciseness, and that's being frugal with your words and not using more words than you need to in order to say what you want to say. And then finally, check your writing for clarity. Is your writing clear? Can your reader follow your ideas? Is your writing precise? And remember that these principles of effective scholarly writing feed right into the other aspects of APA. So we're talking about in-text citations, your reference list, making sure your formatting of your overall paper is following APA guidelines. And finally, remember, it's always better to oversight than undersight.